All right, so I tell you what, why don't we impose upon our newest select board member to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Dan, if you don't mind.
If I can, I don't have a flag.
That's all right.
Just wave your hand.
Got you covered, Dan.
All right.
Oh,
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the first order of business is selecting a new select board chair. So never done this before, but I'm assuming we begin by opening the floor for nominations.
I'll nominate Melanie Joe.
I second that.
All right, are there any other nominations? If not, then we'll close the nominations and we'll have a roll call vote. Rick Dameron?
Yes.
Dan Newman?
Yes.
Melanie Jewell?
Yes.
Kathleen Wall?
Yes.
Ricky Merkins?
Yes.
All right, Madam Chair, I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, folks.
Great.
All right, I will open the floor for nominations for vice chair. I'd like to nominate Ricky Dameron. Oh, you just rolled your eyes, Ricky. Is that a no?
I'll second it.
Any other nominations? Seeing none. Dan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Kathy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ernie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ricky, how do you vote?
I'm going to abstain from this.
All right, my vote is yes. So thank you, Ricky, for agreeing to do. Did you agree to do vice chair?
I didn't really, but I'll do it.
You rolled your eyes pretty well, so.
No.
All right. So we move on to the next part of the meeting, which is public comment. Is there anyone here who has something that they would like to share with the board? I was asked by one of our taxpayers today if we could potentially entertain the idea. I don't know if you all know that Camp Bombazine is going to be sold by the Boy Scouts of America to help to raise some money to hopefully save the organization. So I had someone approach me and ask if the board had considered purchasing it for the town of Belgrade. And I explained that we hadn't met since the announcement. So I don't know that we can entertain that entirely this evening, but I guess she wanted me to put a bug in your ear. She is going to try to join us at some point. They had a family function tonight, so. Sorry, that's my dog.
My suggestion is maybe if they've got an interest in that, maybe they ought to bring it to the town manager and kind of bring some details with it so we got some idea what's happening.
Dan?
The other question I've got, we may want to do a little research, is the last time they tried to sell a bunch of that property off and they got into a world of trouble because they found out that when that was donated to the Boy Scouts, it was a stipulation. It wasn't supposed to be sold. So I don't know how that was ever settled the last time they sold.
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, well, and the assessed value of it is 1 million. Sorry, Kathy, what was that?
I agree with Rick. I think that if anybody's really interested in having us consider it, that number one, we need more information than we currently have. And number two, the route through the town manager is probably the most appropriate way to go.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything that they would like for us to address this evening?
So I just have one question about that. So are you guys wanting me just to wait for a phone call, or Melanie, do you want to talk later on and you pass along some contact information? Or?
I can do that.
Okay.
All right, new business, the consideration of the property tax commitment. So Anthony, do you want to read what you put in the select board packet?
Well, I'll just a brief introduction, and our assessor, Rob Duplessier, is here with us as well. And I may go to a screen sharing thing as he walks you through the worksheet here very shortly. But as you guys know, all of the articles with one rather insignificant exception passed last week during the town meeting. And so the calculations that were previously shared with you have changed only slightly, and that is that the overlay has increased by $5,000 because that $5,000 article regarding the fireworks failed. And so what Rob and I are both proposing here is that we commit the property taxes at the same rate as we did in 2019, which was 15.38. I think that that will provide the resources that the town needs in order to meet its obligations. It does provide a sizable overlay that will serve as a safety net, but I want you to keep in mind, we still don't have any word from the state on what our municipal revenue sharing is going to be. We know it's going to be down, and for the purposes of this calculation, we budgeted that at 40% less than what the state had initially told us back last spring. And Rob has said that a lot of the towns that he works with are budgeting 1/3 or more decrease in our municipal revenue sharing. And our excise tax to date is rather flat. And so we had budgeted an increase over what we collected last year, but so far that's flat. And so I do think it is wise that we have a sizable overlay this year. To put into some context, the overlay would be twice what the town of Rome adopted this year, but it's going to be 4 times more than what we did last year. And just so you know, I wish I could take credit for this idea because I think it's a really good idea, but I was chatting late this afternoon with Mary Vogel and with Nick Poole, and Mary suggested, and I had thrown out a suggestion about how we might be able to use any sort of surplus that we have from this year moving forward. And Mary had what I thought was just a capital idea, which is that whatever surplus that we have, we dedicate that toward the salt well issue that we know is out there looming. And I think that's a good plan indeed. We continue to examine and postpone whatever spending that we can, although we know our election costs have exceeded budget because of the unforeseen circumstances. But like I said, if we do end up with a surplus, we will use whatever unspent funds strategically in next year's budget. And with that, Rob, is there anything you want to add to that before I share the screen here?
Well, thank you. I think it's a good idea, and we're in a good position to be able to have a healthy overlay and keep the taxes flat. Like Anthony said, there's so many unknowns this year. We don't know even what's going to happen going forward. We did compensate for the anticipated lowering of revenue sharing. I am a strong proponent of keeping a mill rate the same when you can. Take aside anything you may do with those overlay funds. A couple of things for the board to remember. When you set an overlay, you're allowed to set it at any number less than 5% of your budget. So the maximum overlay we can have in this budget is $431,000. So it's considerably less than that. But that's one thing that we look at. And the other thing when you talk about overlay is we're raising it legitimately as we are allowed to do, but what we cannot do without the vote of the people is spend any of it. Anything that we don't use will roll into the general fund to be used at the taxpayer's discretion next year. And what that could do, aside from anything else you may want to do with it, is give us the leeway of saying, you know, we had $167,000 overlay. You know, we've dedicated some of it to the salt, however you want to take care of that issue. But it allows the budget committee and the selectmen to say, you know what, maybe we could take $75,000 of last year's overlay to help reduce next year's tax burden. So maybe there's a good chance we could keep this 1538 3 years in a row. I know it's been my experience that the taxpayers really do like a consistent tax rate. You know, to go down a few pennies here and there, it's good. It looks good in the meantime. But going forward, if we have to end up going up on the mill rate because we didn't have this overlay to potentially tap from, taxpayers will not remember the decrease, but they will remember the increase. But they do appreciate something stagnant. Also, and I'm sure Anthony's going to get into this next, that the homestead exemption that the state allows everybody to have did go up this year. It went from 20,000 to 25,000 if we're at full value. And what the state also did was that extra $5,000 that everybody gets in homestead exemption, they're reimbursing the town for all the potential lost value. So it's a net zero to us. So that being said, every homesteader at a flat mill rate is going to receive, Anthony, $75 to $80 decrease in their bill just because of the increase in the homestead. So I think that in itself is a good faith effort to the taxpayers, saying that we've held the line on our budgets. We're allowed to keep something consistent with the mill rate and give us flexibility going forward to maybe use these extra funds in many different ways.
All right, so Rob, well done, and thank you for mentioning that decrease in the property tax levy as a result of the increased homestead exemption. So are you ready for me to share the screen here?
Yes.
Anthony, just so you know, I never did get a selectman's packet, so.
You didn't?
No.
I thought I emailed it to your.
No, I got all your other emails, but I never did receive that email, so. So if you can just make sure that I'm on the list.
All right, here. Okay, are you guys seeing my screen?
Almost.
Not yet.
It's buffering.
There we go.
Buffering.
Yep,
Okay.
We go.
it's gone.
Okay. Can you guys see that all right?
Yep. I can. I don't know about the others.
Yes.
And Rob, you just tell me how far down you need me to scroll.
All right, we'll just go right from the top. So number one is all the new taxable, well, all the taxable real estate we have in town, that it would include anything that we've picked up new for the first time this year, new houses, new garages, new lot splits, things of that nature. I don't have a last year's rate sheet to let you know how much it did increase, but it went up as we would expect it to be. Number two is all personal property, which is business equipment that's subject to taxation that's not exempted. So $4.6 million of that. So line 3 starts all of the local taxable valuation in town. All right. Then this spreadsheet kind of branches out a little bit, because you can see on line 4A, $22 million is the total amount of homesteads that we've given to all of our residents. So 22, 216, 800. And this is where the change comes in on 4B. That 4B, that $15,500,000 number represents 70% of everything we gave away. So that's more important as we get down below. So basically we give away $22.2 million of homestead value. The state is reimbursing us at $15.5 million of that value. And then this line 5A and 5B, there's certain personal property that's not included in line 2. That would be some newer qualifying items that basically the state is trying to work very slowly in getting rid of personal property altogether. So any new items that were brought into the state of Maine as as of April 1st, 2008 would qualify, but that's something that the taxpayer has to apply for every year. And to be honest with you, the vast majority of that would be Gagne and Hammond, non-retail side of Hammond Lumber. So that $2.2 million, $2.3 million, that number is always stagnant here anyway. So the state reimburses us 50 cents on the dollar as they do 70 cents on the dollar for the homestead. So line 6 is the big one that we look at. Line 6 is everything that we can tax or basically is virtually a taxable item in the form of a reimbursement. So the line 6 is line 3 plus line 4A plus 4B and 5B. 3, 4B, 5B is 6. So $572 million. Now that number is up more than $5 million over last year. So that was good. I mean, the economy's until recently has been going very well. A lot of new building permits, a lot of new lot splits, things of that nature. So that's the number that we focused on, the one on line 6. And now come the next 3 lines of text are basically our 3 bills. We pay the county a tax. That's up slightly, I believe. So we pay the county $690,000. That's calculated based on county need and the state's valuation for Belgrade, and as it compares in a proportional ratio to everything else in the Kennebec County. The municipal appropriations on line 8, that's what we voted on at last week's election. That's the number that's $5,000 less than we had sent to you earlier because of that one article that didn't pass. And then number 10 is school appropriations. Schools on a fiscal year, we're on a calendar year, so we pay 6 payments of last year's school budget and 6 payments of this year's school budget. We've double checked that number to make sure that is right, and that is the right number. So our gross budget, those 3 lines together, $10,250,000. And from that number, we have two areas of deduction. Line number 12 is what we spoke of earlier, is revenue sharing. The state has this big long formula that dictates how much of the coffers that the money they receive in their coffers, they're going to distribute to every town. Before COVID hit, everybody's share was going to go up by a fair amount. I mean, their coffers were larger. They started giving a bigger percentage to all the towns to help in revenue sharing. But what all of us are trying to do locally is the state sends the town a check every month based on their revenues from, I believe, 2 months prior. And that is basically, it's very fluid. They take their money in, they have their formula, and we get our distribution checks. So when things really were ground to a halt in March, April, May, we're just now starting to see the ramifications from that lower tax collection from the state. So Anthony and I spoke, and this $159,600 is, like he said, a fair amount less than what was anticipated. It ends up being slightly less than last year. This is an approach that we talked about, and I'm speaking to my other towns that I work for, and we've had similar reductions, 35, 45, sometimes 50% of the anticipated revenue. Again, one good reason to have a more healthy overlay, not knowing exactly where that number is going to end up. Line number 13 is all other revenues. That would be, the biggest one of that would be excise tax that we've collected or anticipated to collect. Anything that during town meeting we decided to pay for some of our articles not from taxation, or partly from taxation and partly from maybe we had a bond, or maybe we took money at the general fund, and that's all accounted for at town meeting as well. And that's a little under 1.5 million. Those two numbers together, line 14, 1.6 million. We take that away from the gross budget of line 11, which is 10,250,000. So after those deductions, the amount of tax to be levied locally from property tax is line 15. 8,635,000. And I won't bore you with all the detail between line 16 and line 23. This form has been around for forever. I've been doing this for 30 years and I've seen the same form. It's a bunch of fail safes to go through so you don't over commit your tax. Like I said before, your tax overlay can be 5% of line 15, and that number is represented on line 20, which is $431,000. So basically what these calculations do, it gives you on line 17, the minimum tax rate we would need to run the town, pay the school, pay the county is $15,087. That would be no extra dollars above and beyond the minimum that we need to collect. Line 18 is just the ceiling to hit that if you collected the maximum overlay of 5%, your maximum mill rate could be 15,842. So as long as you pick a rate on line 19 that's between those two numbers, you have a legal assessment. And which we've done, we recommend keeping last year's mill rate 1538, which gives you a tax of commitment on line 19 of $8,546,000. And the overlay amount is a very simple mathematical formula of line 19 minus line 15. So every dollar that we're raising above and beyond the minimum falls into line 23 into the overlay. The last 2 points of reference is line 21. You'll see that $15.5 million number that was up above in line 4B, the portion of the homestead that the state is going to reimburse us on. And that comes out to $239,000 of revenue we will get from the state. Same with line 22. That's the reimbursed portion of the exempted personal property, 1.1 million. Again, we'll get funds from the state of 17,600. And the reason they're broken up this way, if you really study this screen, those two numbers are not committed to our tax collector. The state set these laws up in such a way not to be beholden to the town. Lord forbid, if they didn't pay us our reimbursement, technically, they would be under the same guise as a lien for a resident who didn't pay their taxes. But these numbers are guaranteed, because we count on these numbers to the penny. This isn't a program that the state is going to shave or cut like they do on revenue sharing. These numbers are committed to us. We expect to get those numbers to the penny, and we will get those numbers to the penny. So that's why that form is a little convoluted that way. So the two things really that the board will be talking about is choosing a mill rate and the subsequent overlay on line 23. Any other questions that you guys have?
Yeah, may I ask a question?
Yes.
In years past, we have put in the warrant an amount for the TAN, the tax anticipation note, and then on the floor reduced that amount to the actual number which was available at the time of the town meeting. We didn't have any floor town meeting this year, so we raised the entire $50,000. And if I understood correctly from the town manager, our TAN was somewhere in the order of $28,000. So there's a difference of $22,000 there. Where does that go in our accounting?
So may I answer that? So Jack, when we calculated these numbers, we used the correct figure, the $27,000 figure. So on line 8, that municipal appropriation, that includes the $27,000 that we actually are spending on TAN interest versus the $50,000 that was authorized by the town.
Okay, now does the difference, is the difference in play at all? Is that money available, or is that just wiped out by what's been done?
No, it's just wiped out by what's been done. So we did not account in these calculations for that additional $23,000. We
Okay,
use
thank
the
you.
actual,
Okay.
we use the actual figure of the TAN.
All right, Anthony.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, not Anthony, Rob.
Yes, ma'am.
So I just want to make sure that I'm reading it right. On line 15, it says the net to be raised by local property tax rate is $8,635,809 with 38 cents.
Mhm.
And then when I come down to the tax for commitment, we have $8,546,516.81. So am I correct that it's $89,000 difference?
It is, because earlier I said that line 21 and 22 are accounted for separately. The tax for commitment on line 19 is the responsibility of the tax collector to collect it. The line 21 and 22 is a reimbursement from the state, and they don't want to be under the gun for the collector to come looking for them.
Okay.
I think the mathematics would be the $89,000 less if you took those two, if you took line 21 and 22 out of there and added in line 23, it will match. Because we do anticipate the collector to be responsible for the overlay amount.
Now, and Rob, what was our overlay last year?
You know, I was afraid you were going to ask me that. I did not bring that with me.
I'm sorry.
40,000.
40,000.
I think
$40,739.
40,700.
Go lay down. Winnie, stop. All right, so this is better.
Lot better.
One question. So on lines 21 and 22, rate is reducing down, then you're also reducing the amount of homestead and getting rid, correct?
Your voice is breaking up.
Yeah.
I thought maybe it was my internet.
Okay, let me try this again. Can everyone hear me clearly?
No.
No.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing here. Hold on. Okay, is that better?
No.
No.
Hey, can you hear me now? Okay. I have my question into the chat.
All right, can everyone see the chat from Anthony?
Oh,
Yep.
Yes, it would. Yeah, if we took, because it is strictly that line 21 and 22, those finite amounts by the chosen mill rate will lower the homestead and reimbursement amounts. Yeah.
Okay.
For example, I have another, if the mill rate was lower, like if we go to a mill rate of 15.3 even, there'd be a $1,500 loss of homestead reimbursement and a $100 or $200 loss on the Betty reimbursement. So it's all specific on the rate we choose. Yes.
Okay. All right, does anyone have any more questions?
I do not.
Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else who's not part of the board who has any questions about this process? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for setting the mill rate.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second.
All right, so the motion on the floor is to use the mill rate of 0.015380. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Ricky, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ernie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Kathy, how do you vote?
Yes.
All right, and the chair votes yes. We've set the mill rate the same as last year, 0.015380.
I think Anthony's trying to say something. I don't know what. Sounds like a frog.
I'm not. I just turned off my video. Can you hear me better now?
No.
I'm not sure what to do.
Do you want to come? Do you want to come to my house?
What I'm going to do is I'm going to make Melanie. I'm going to make you the host, and then I'm going to sign off and then sign back on.
Okay, is that going to mess anything up? Because I'm not as tech savvy as you are.
No, you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Okay. All right, so moving on to the next item on the agenda. We have some folks here from the Board of Appeals, and I understand, wanted to have a discussion about the consent judgment that was entered with Sean Grant and Brightside Marina. Is there anyone who'd like to lead the questions?
I would like the Board of Appeals to identify themselves. I'm afraid I don't know them all.
Well, I'll start. I'm Jay Bradshaw, and I'm one of the Board of Appeals members.
Thank you.
I'm Dick Bourne, one of the Appeals Board members.
Thank you.
I'm Max Stocco, also on the Appeals Board.
Thank you.
Michael Haino, Appeals Board.
Thank you.
I'm Norma Blazer. I'm an alternate on the Board of Appeals.
Thank you.
All right, thank you folks for joining us.
Thank you.
So I'm understanding, well, I guess somebody just posed the question. Is the question that I'm understanding is that the judgment that was rendered was for $20,000 and it was not equal to the amount of money that the town spent on this process? No, that's not the question.
Well, so Sam, I see Sam is on the horn, and I'm delighted to see that he is. Sam has been our chair up until just recently. I'm not the chair. I just offered to facilitate getting this on the agenda, and I appreciate your entertaining us. I think what we were really trying to do is, at its simplest, was just understand a bit more about the process that the board used in coming to the terms of the consent agreement. This was a high-profile case that went on for quite a while, and I see that Sean is with us as well, which is great. And so what we're trying to do is understand, just from the standpoint of having ordinances in place. There's a cease and desist order that was in place for a couple of years, if I recall correctly. Went through planning board, appeals board, and then several court appeals. We're just trying to understand a bit about how the things that the Board of Select Persons considered in coming to the terms of the consent agreement, not just the fine that Sean agreed to pay, but also the other terms that allows him to keep the docks in place. Really just trying to have that understanding. We respect that you have a lot more information about this than we do. We're just one of the committees that was closely involved with this and interested in knowing a bit more about this from the process standpoint.
Anthony, are we able to hear you better at this point?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah, very good.
Nicely done.
So I feel like I'm a little bit at a loss because I'm totally a paper person and I like to have my stacks of paper all together. Because there was multiple meetings with our attorney, and our attorney was keeping us apprised of what was going on in court. and then coming back and having conversations with us about what we could request for a judgment, and if we, at what we were able to recoup and what we were possibly unable to recoup. So, Anthony, do you have more of like the timeline?
I don't have a timeline, but if it's helpful, I will, just talk about the things that our attorney advised the board to consider as they were working through this process. And I think it's easy just to say, well, the town spent X amount of money in the appeals process that went all the way to the Maine State Supreme Court, and so that the town is entitled to recoup all of those dollars. That would be sort of a logical way of thinking. But our attorney advised us that that's not how an enforcement action works. And so you're sort of starting from zero. And it's like any other sort of legal dispute, you have to weigh the risks and the rewards. And so, we negotiated with Brightside in this case. And, at a certain point, and I'll let the board speak for itself, but the board had to decide whether or not it wanted to continue to pursue this in the courts and continue to rack up the legal fees that would be entailed from that. And without knowing if we would even recoup $20,000 worth of the expense that we had poured into the case. So, there was a bit of a risk and reward just as far as the financial settlement goes. And I'll be quiet now and let any of the board members who want to weigh in on that speak to that if they choose.
Well, I think you very succinctly said it. I think there was an opportunity to either continue on in the court system or to close it out with a judgment that we could live with, as opposed to reaching for something higher and having the possibility of not getting that. And I think that, how long did this go on? 3 years? We've been doing this for 3 years? And I think that I, for one, and I think other board members also felt that it was important to have a consent decree from the courts that would allow us to go back and prosecute if there was continued illegal activity on site. Where?
So this is Mac. I'm a appeals board member, and I guess I respect everybody on the board. I know each of you individually, and I respect you, and I do understand that you have lots of things going on. I'm speaking both as an appeals board member and as a resident of Belgrade. And I guess I'm just confused, to be honest. You say that we just wanted to come to an agreement so that the thing would not continue on in court and we might not recoup anything. So my understanding is it went to the Maine Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the land, and they unanimously voted in favor of the town. I don't know where the next step would be. Like, we won at every step. It went to the very end and we still won. I don't know when you say the attorney advised you that this could drag on and you might not be able to recoup anything, I don't understand that. Like, it went to the state Supreme Court and we won. That's the end, isn't it? What am I missing?
Well, Mac, and board, if I may, you got to think about this in the sort of parallel lanes. The case that went to the state Supreme Court was defending the planning board and the appeal board's ruling that commercial activity was not allowed at that location. And so the courts did uphold that. But that's separate and apart from the enforcement action in which the town is seeking financial penalties and other terms that we agreed to. So one is not necessarily linked to the other. And the attorney did advise that even though, as you pointed out, we won each of those appeals all the way through the state Supreme Court, that's not to say that we wouldn't encounter a judge who was sympathetic to Brightside and might award something or might find them at a level that was less than $20,000. And again, that's where the board had to weigh their risk and their rewards. And so again, I understand the confusion there, because it seems like, you know, we spent this amount of money, we won at every level, as you pointed out, and so that should be the starting point for the negotiations. But the enforcement action is a whole other matter than the one that went to the state Supreme Court.
Well, okay, so I get, okay, so then as a appeals board member, I don't have any personal vendetta against Brightside Marina. I honestly don't. I don't really know Brightside Marina. I don't know Sean on a personal level. I honestly am looking at this as a objective appeals board member. That was my job. I looked at, okay, the case in front of me, you know, what is allowed according to our ordinance and what is not allowed according to our ordinance. And so then I'm looking at it as an appeals board member and a resident. We have an ordinance in place. The appeals board interpreted that. The planning board interpreted that, went to the appeals board. Appeals board interpreted that, went to the state appeals. They backed us up. Went to the state Supreme Court. They backed us up unanimously at every level. Therefore, I believe we interpreted the ordinance correctly at every level. And if we did, then my question as an appeals board member and as a resident is, if we won at every level, meaning we interpreted our ordinance correctly at every level, and we still sort of have this enforcement that allows things to happen that are not in the ordinance, then what kind of authority does the ordinance have? I mean, why are we on an appeals board spending hours and hours and hours looking at an appeals board that the state interpreted, we did interpret correctly, and then it just, at the very end, it goes back and says, well, doesn't matter. You have a great ordinance, you interpreted it correctly, but we're not going to follow it. Well, then why, as a resident, do we have ordinances?
Well, Mac, I think you have to understand that you're right. The court ruled in the town's favor all along the way. And that ruling was to ensure that there was no commercial activity on that non-conforming lot. And that is, in fact, the end that we got to through this case. And so, you know, Brightside is not allowed to have any sort of commercial activity on that lakefront lot because it doesn't conform, as you know, to the ordinance. And so in that regard, you know, I think the ordinance does have teeth. You know, we won't see any more of that sort of commercial activity on that lot.
So Anthony, something that you said really resonated with me. Do I understand that there's actually two different paths that were followed with regard to this application? One, when you refer to the enforcement piece, does that refer to the cease and desist order?
Correct. And so
I just want to be sure. So
yeah.
Part A, what you refer to enforcement is the cease and desist order. Part B, or the other one, is the application process. The application process, which was submitted to the planning board and then the appeals board and then went through the court system. So if we compartmentalize those, do I understand correctly that what you're saying is that with regard to the fine, that really needed to go towards the enforcement side of this, not the permit application and appeals process? If that's the case, so then what we're saying is the consent agreement really was with regard to the 2 years or however long it was that they operated while the cease and desist order was in place. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Anthony, this is Samantha Grant. Can I add something?
Samantha?
Is that appropriate?
Yeah, the chair will recognize you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a point that in conversations and negotiations with the final consent agreement with the attorney, it was recognized that the cease and desist order was not valid because it wasn't it was served during the appeals process, which invalidated that. Furthermore, you know, Brightside negotiated in good faith to come up with a reasonable settlement to continue the litigation process. Would have involved some risk to the town too, because there was some substantial evidence that wasn't able to be brought forward into the appeals board or to the continuing process relative to the town's prior knowledge of operations. There was a number of facts of the case that were not presented as part of the previous litigation process that would be relevant, that would be able to be brought forward as part of the negotiation process. And nobody wanted to incur more legal fees for the town or for Brightside. So what the appeals board heard and the ordinance piece was correct. You're correct, and that was enforced. And there was judgment finding in favor of the town. However, there were other circumstances that could be brought forward that could change that with litigation, which would be a separate litigation relative to the fines imposed. So I hope that offers some clarity.
Well, with all due respect, on this call right now, there are 5 people who engaged in those executive session discussions, and only those 5 people know what was discussed.
Of course, but I think,
yeah,
and I can share that point for the people that are questioning.
Or just
from our perspective.
Just speaking as one member, I have zero interest in trying to relitigate this thing because I think you had a very talented attorney, the town had a very talented attorney. I think that attorneys put their best case forward. If there's other information, whatever. That's not really my issue. My issue is just trying to understand from the standpoint of not just this case. I mean, this was a really high profile case, as you know. I mean, you guys spent a lot of money, the town spent a lot of money, it dragged on for a couple of years. It was a high profile case. But my interest as just an appeals board member, I'm not the chair, and taxpayer, is just understanding the process. And so what happens, you know, in future cases? How can the town do something better the next time out so that we don't wind up with $110,000 or $20,000 in legal fees and a case that drags on for 3 years, 2 or 3 years, whatever it is, because that's not good for any of us. And so that's at its simplest, that's where I'm coming from.
So I do have to say, as far as the legal fees go, we were advised by our attorney that the town is not actually allowed to attempt to collect back from a judgment the legal fees that were spent. They're 2 separate entities. And we initially were kind of slapped by that. Like, so the taxpayers have spent upwards of $50,000 on this, and to find out that we were not allowed to recoup that was disheartening. That's not how we envisioned it, and I guess, you know, that's simply the process, is that there could be, they had to be 2 separate things, and essentially the town had to eat the cost for the litigation, which, so essentially everyone in town did, which we were there was nobody on the board who was happy with that process.
Nor were we as taxpayers, just saying.
Right. Kathy?
I just, I think that it's important to note, first of all, that as you say, Melanie, none of us were happy with it. I feel somewhat hobbled about making a lot of comments this evening simply because much was discussed in executive session. I think it's, to me, the public information is that there was a conviction. There was a conviction for illegal activity. Whatever, as you say, there were lawyers on both sides and they argued the case. The short story is that there was a conviction. The other piece of the pie is, I don't think anybody really felt like we got enough money.
Thank you. Norma?
Okay, I don't want to end that or anything, but my question is, I don't think the situation that's left after this is clear. I don't think we really cleared up anything about the use of the docks and how you get there. So my question is, you know, didn't we leave a lot of problems for the future by this agreement?
Well, the consent decree says that there can be no more commercial activity on those docks. And I believe that that was the starting point for the appeals board, was it not?
There can be no more commercial activity on the lot. It doesn't say anything about the docks.
Hold on.
Can't collect a fee on that lot. Or maybe it says you can't collect a fee for using the docks.
It says engage in no commercial activity from the property at 24 Hewlin Road on the stream.
Right.
Although Whiteside's docks may remain in the water, a fee cannot be charged for their use.
Right.
Or other activities that require the usage of the land at this property.
And so he has this huge investment, I recognize that, on the water, which is not prohibited, apparently. He's going to use it somehow, you know, or take it away. We left that open. And maybe it's irresolvable, I don't know, but I did not think that this solved the question that we actually had, which was, can those docks be there and loaded on that from that property? The only other way to get there is with a helicopter.
I read that as no commercial activity on those docks and in that property that abuts the water.
So just to help me understand, I don't have a boat, and I don't have a boat on Great Pond, but could I pull into those docks and use it? Are they open for public access at this point? Or is it just limited to people who have a business relationship with Brightside?
I can answer that.
Thank you.
We are allowing friends, people with Hoyts Island that do not have another place to store their boats to get free. So if you had permission, you could tie up to the docks for free. There's no commercial activity. We're allowing friends, family, but we concurred with the attorney that you know, we're not charging a fee for it. But we've invested in them, and we, you know, there's many Belgrade Lake taxpayers and residents who have come to depend on access to Hoyts Island and other areas of Belgrade Lakes through that, that don't have access otherwise. And we're committed not to leaving them high and dry, so there is no charge. And in reviewing that with the town's attorney, that's perfectly legal. Does that help?
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I guess the issue that's at the heart of my question is, so given that everybody has acknowledged, and I haven't talked with Mr. and Mrs. Grant about this, but just from what I've read in the paper, everybody acknowledges this thing dragged on a lot longer than any of us would have liked it to be. And it cost everybody a lot more money than any of us would like. So going forward, what have we learned from this? Are there things from a process standpoint, from a quality improvement standpoint, that the town could and will do differently so that we don't find ourselves in a similar case in 2021 or 22 or whatever with another similar appeal? I mean, what do we learn from this and how can we make it better?
Jay, I think simply from an administrative standpoint, you know, I'm committed to vigilant enforcement. And so, you know, I would encourage the community, if they see something that raises a concern, please contact me, contact us, and we will look into that matter just as quickly and swiftly as we possibly can.
So not looking to get into any confidential discussions that you and the Grants had, but are there things that were learned from this? This is a kind of a yes/no question. Are there things that are learned from this so that if there was another cease and desist action, that it could be a little bit more locked in so that it wasn't subject to continuing on for a couple of years and tens of thousands of dollars of costs?
Yeah, and maybe other board members can speak to this, but it seems to me that our attorney advised us at one point that we could not, or advised against pursuing the enforcement action as the appeal was winding its way through the courts. Because at that point, I guess there was still a question as to whether or not commercial activity was allowed at that lot. The courts had yet to make an ultimate ruling. And that ultimate ruling, you know, of course, came from the state Supreme Court.
So would you welcome any comments from me on prior to getting to this point? From our perspective, I'd be, you know, as a taxpayer, I am, you know, I think that the process, if you tightened up the process prior to getting to the appeals board, to the, you know, having your permitting process tightened up, because I think as the planning board heard, you know, before putting in docks, we did talk to Gary Fuller. We were told, go ahead, there's no ordinance on docks. There was no formal process. The previous permitting process wasn't clearly outlined and was kind of slack. So I you know, and in doing our review, there are multiple businesses that are in similar situations to us that aren't permitted, that are operating. And, you know, I think that that's, the town's loaded for potential, you know, should you have to enforce those, there's many similar situations that could happen. You know, we did a small survey, which I authored to share with Anthony, of businesses on Main Street that were not permitted at all. And there's a lot of them. So from a taxpayer perspective, and also from, you know, the perspective that we were just put in, you know, we were involved with the town every step of the way. We had signs out, we contacted the town, we got a permit to upgrade the parking area, to put a culvert back in. Never once did we suspect that we were operating without an appropriate permit. So there needs to be some safeguards put in place prior to getting to the point that we got in. And based on the survey of permits that we did as part of this process, we came up with probably 10 businesses that have no business permits in the same, within this proximity in shoreline zoning. So I think it starts earlier than getting to this point of being consistent and having policies and dotting your I's and crossing your T's. Does that make sense?
That does. I appreciate your input for that, Samantha.
Yeah.
In fact, offered to help with that in the beginning when this was all over, to look at permitting and help the town organize it, because there seemed to be, that there was no record of tracking what businesses had permits or not. But,
well, I really appreciate that input, Samantha, and I think that that's really valuable. And I hope that if there's a message that we can all take away from this, it's like, we can do better. I mean, I think it is nothing short of obscene that there was over $100,000 spent between the town and the grants on this. I'm very sure that Sean and Samantha didn't wake up one morning and say, hey, let's toss 60 grand, into this process. So I hope that we can somehow, sort of pause from this and say, okay, what can we do differently, just so that they and we and others don't ever find themselves in this case again.
And please understand that we invested a lot of money in putting in these docs after talking to the CEO, talking to the previous town manager prior to Dennis Ketchel about getting the lighting turned back on for the dock customers. This was not a blatant operation illegally. We were clearly under the impression, after numerous conversations with the town, getting a permit to expand, to put in a new culvert for the parking lot for the dock customers, but everything was casual. Casual approvals, no written, you can go ahead and do this, although we did get a written permit to put in a culvert for the parking area. So, I think that this has gotten drawn out to the letter of the law to say the permit was only for painting and varnishing. But my perspective is the town, there's a lot of potential risk in other areas if you were to, uniformly enforce all of these other businesses that aren't permitted correctly, and that think they're permitted correctly because that's what they were told to do 15 years ago.
So I think what I'm gathering from this, if no one minds, is that the select board and the CEO, that, perhaps it's time that we do sit back and reevaluate the permitting process and the clarity of it, and the fact that, maybe there needs to be more hands-on assistance throughout the permitting process at each step of the way. I'm sure this isn't the first time that someone has been surprised that they needed a permit. I mean, I will throw out there, I put up a tiny little Rubbermaid shed, had no idea if I'd need a permit, wasn't a permanent structure. I did, it cost me $2.38. But when I asked, I actually needed a permit. But not everybody knows to ask. So.
And I will add that I did call before doing the docks and asked if I needed any specific marina permit. I was referred to the DEP. The DEP said, no, you do not, because you're not building a structure. The town said, we don't need a permit for docks. We're not building a structure. There was a complete lack of clarity before we invested the amount of money. And we're not, I'm not a stupid person. I would not have taken out a loan. I would not have, we would not have financed this without thinking that the appropriate things were in place. We would not have invested that much money just on, the idea that we could get away with it. Absolutely not. And so we dotted our I's, crossed our T's, went through the DEP hierarchy checklist, have emails from Dennis Ketchel that, you need a permit from the DEP. These are all things that played into, the settlement decision, just so people know. I mean, we did our homework. We went through the steps that we thought we were supposed to go through. We thought we had the A-OK, and 2.5 years later, we're getting, no, it's illegal.
I do have a question, please.
Yes. Go ahead, Sam.
Sam Hudspeth. I was on the appeals board. Unfortunately, I had to resign due to some health issues. But my question is, because I'm not fully aware, just from what I read in the paper, is it the select board or the town's contention? Where do we stand now with Brightside? Is Brightside putting forward any paperwork for commercial activities, or is the town's belief that boat rental, boat tours, kayak rental, etc., is considered a home occupation and not a commercial activity?
We are in the process of putting forth a commercial application.
So what has changed, I guess, from the, I mean, we will still then be back where we were 2 years ago, will we not? If you're putting forward a commercial application.
We're putting forth a commercial application for across the street.
So I guess I just feel like we're going to get back to where we were, and then we're going to get back to this situation of, well, it seems that we can't enforce it, so where do we go?
Sam, I do believe without a commercial application that has been approved, if there are kayak rentals or jet ski rentals or anything like that where there's actually money exchanging hands, that would be a clear violation of.
But I mean, they're right now doing all that, I believe, correct?
So we aren't doing kayak rentals right now. So we are putting forth a commercial application. The specific details, it's questionable based on legal discussions as to whether or not, first of all, a boat repair business, which it clearly says on the permit, it's not just painting and varnishing, is a, should have been given a home operation business to start with. So that's questionable, but that was what was advised at the time, because apparently a home operation business should be non-discernible from the street. Clearly a boat repair business would have boats outside. So the specifics of what could be or might not be included in a boat repair business would have to be determined. We are in good faith applying for a commercial application. And, you know, we've met with the planning board. There doesn't seem to be anything that would prohibit the commercial application. Of course, that is for the 21 Hewland side across the street from the water side. We're not applying for anything at this point for the water side, but this is to expand the services to try to be in compliance with what the town is now telling us that we need to do outside of the home occupation permit. Again, I would add that you know, the town's been fully aware that there were boat rentals. We have emails, you know, regarding boat rentals, reservations. We're not doing that off the dock, but there are other businesses that are doing the same thing without permits to do that in Belgrade. So, you know, we're trying to be good citizens. We're trying to do what the town is asking us to do, but I to be honest, sometimes it feels like we've been singled out to jump through hoops that other organizations, other businesses are not having to jump through for whatever reason. So that's in the works, if that answers your question, to expand the services beyond the boat repair shop, which is the home occupation business. But non-successful, you know, if you read the agreement, non-successful, if we didn't succeed in getting a commercial permit, it does not impact the home occupation permit.
So, Sam, is your question whether or not there are rentals going on there currently?
I don't know if he heard you.
No, like I said, I have a hearing loss. I wear a cochlear implant. What were you saying, Ms. Jewett?
I'm saying, is your question whether or not there are commercial rentals going on now, like renting of?
Well, I mean, I don't,
boats and,
it's my understanding from reading the newspaper article and my awareness of the Brightside website, it looks to me like all we've really done through your discussions is said you can no longer rent slip space. And I can only speak for myself. When I voted on the appeals board, it was beyond just slip space. It was all of the other activities, in my mind, constituted commercial activities. So just taking away, well, we won't rent slip space anymore, but we'll do all the other activities, still to me constitutes commercial activity. Therefore, it's still a violation, which all it does then is sort of look like the board just said, well, we can't enforce this, so let's just get what we can. And then they'll just continue on doing what they're doing short of renting slip spaces.
But can I just clarify? There is no commercial activity happening across the street, which is the piece of parcel in question. The activity that's happening on the home permitted side was not part of the appeals board.
I mean, again, it's how you interpret commercial activity. But if so you're saying they pay for the boat, they pay for all the activity to rent a boat, to rent a kayak, to rent a canoe. They pay for it on 20. What is it?
We're delivering.
And they actually do the activity on 21.
No. We're delivering to the public launch or delivering to camp. We're not doing anything.
Our new plan, I might add, is that we're going to start delivering to the Center for No Reason, because that's public space. We're going to deliver there.
No, we're not. We're not doing anything off 21. I mean, off 24, which is the dock side. We're meeting, if people want to rent a boat, we're meeting at the public launch or delivering them to their camps. So we offer free delivery on Great Pond. I mean, we only have 3 rental boats.
Okay, because it used to be if you rented a paddle board from you, you couldn't.
We've sold after the judgment. We sold all of our kayaks, and we have 2 personal paddle boards, but we don't rent them out.
Okay,
they're ones that we use.
Because I think
we've tried to be compliant.
That's all I'm saying.
So yeah, to be clear, we don't have any more kayaks.
All I was asking was, it just seemed to me like the town's position, and again, and that's why I wanted to know, is there still a commercial application going forward? If there is, then does that mean because the town believes that boat tours and boat rentals are considered commercial activity?
My understanding is that it's because the town believes that those activities exceed the scope of a home-based permit that we applied for, which we have. It doesn't mean that we couldn't request an expansion, but we're trying to do what the town wants us to do. And most of those things happen online. It's not really it's not really people dropping by. There's no increased traffic. Like I said, there's other boat rental organizations out there that are doing the same thing without commercial permits. But we're trying to do the right thing. And we're meeting people at the public launch. We're in the process of applying for a commercial permit. I will add that the tab for having the commercial permit done is about $15,000, and we've shopped around. So that's been the delay in that. It's the new permit application is very, very expensive and very complicated. I think that Gary Fuller has offered to assist with that, but we given our history and our experience and the fact that he had assisted in the original permit, we just don't feel confident that the I's will be dotted and the T's will be crossed.
Well, I wish everyone the best in their application.
I'm sorry?
I wish everyone, including you and the town, the best in trying to figure out.
I mean, we are trying to do the right thing.
Works out. Is this, again, I can only speak for my vote. It went beyond just slip rental, and therefore
But I will be clear,
I don't know how
Sam.
the town will be able to approve, and again, I'm going above and beyond what I should, I think, be saying.
But let's,
Like, it seems like the same circumstances in terms of your lot size is there.
it's a different lot. It's not, you're confusing the two issues, which was part of the problem, is that there is a permitted business across the street from the lot where we applied for a commercial application. It's a home permit business. So the two have been melded. We're ceasing any operations for commercial profit across the street. We're putting in a commercial application to expand the services that we offer at 21 Hewlin, which this was new to us. They're separate properties, even though we're on the same deed, which was part of our confusion because our deed says they're contiguous properties, but we have learned from the courts, no, they are not. It's completely separate. The permitting is separate. So if your vote was related to anything other than using the dock or crossing that piece of property through the dock, it was unfortunately misinformed because that really wasn't up for the appeals board discussion because those were activities that were happening. The application process had nothing to do with the business process on the 21 Hewlin side. So they're completely two separate applications, two separate permits, two separate business, two separate processes. So I realized that they meld because that's how we were doing them. But the dock side, the water side of the street is completely outside of the process. We're not doing anything with that at this time. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and I don't have all the paperwork in front of me. I just, as I recall, you did not have a large enough lot size to operate a commercial business.
We do across the street, but that wasn't being discussed. That was never brought forward. There was nothing in our application process that had to do with across the street.
Okay.
Oh, may I ask a question?
One moment, Kathy. Mac?
Thank you, Melanie. I just wanted to say I do appreciate the board bringing this up on the agenda. I very much appreciate Mr. and Mrs. Grant coming to the meeting and sharing their perspective. It sounds to me like somehow after a couple of years, somehow we get to the end and there's still an incredible amount of confusion. And I don't know how you select board members figured out what you were supposed to do. So I'm sorry you had to go through that. Grants, sounds like y'all were confused. And it just seems like a lot of confusion and a lot of money just to get us into a lot of confusion. And, you know,
we're no winners in this.
Yeah, it's so I appreciate y'all having this meeting and sharing your views. So thank you.
All right, Kathy, you had something?
I did. I wanted to know, so you're no longer renting boats down there?
The agreement allows us to continue to rent boats. We do it online. We're meeting people on the docks. If at the end of, we have 90 days to complete the commercial application process, according to your town's attorney. And if we are not successful, we will move the rental business somewhere else.
I understand all of that. I just think that part of the confusion for me is that you maybe need to change your Facebook page that shows a boat sitting in the water and advertising it for rental.
Some of the, some of the pictures.
Just saying that it's out there.
But we're still renting boats. And if we were to change, and this is in discussion with our attorney and your attorney, if at the end of the time period we're not able to rent boats as part of a commercial business, we're not doing it off the dock, we're meeting people where, well,
that's not what your Facebook page says.
I will look at that.
Thank you.
But I will check that out. We have somebody who does that for us, and we pay them. So sometimes it's not updated on a timely manner. But we've not been asked to cease boat rentals or any of that. And per the agreement, we can continue doing that. We're just not doing it off the docks. So we can still advertise that. It's my understanding.
And Melanie, would you once again remind me by reading that consent agreement again? It's not very long.
She said.
So it says, do you want the whole agreement?
Well, just the part that tells you what they're restricted on.
It says engage in no commercial activity from the property at 24 Hewlin Road on the stream. Although Brightside's docks may remain in the water, a fee cannot be charged for their use or for other activities that require usage of the land at this property.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay. Norma, did you have something? I thought you raised your hand.
I did, and I got to think what it was. I just want to say I have a lot of sympathy with you, Samantha, and your husband. I really do. I thought your argument about trying to resolve it up front was very persuasive when you gave it earlier. I think this should have been worked out with the planning board way back when. Okay.
I agree.
And so, I think it was regrettable that it ever got to the Board of Appeals, that you didn't figure out how to do the business in accordance with the ordinance before you spent all this money and the town spent all this money. So I think what you're doing now, in fact, you're told to do that in the consent agreement, is to go back and renegotiate with the planning board, knowing now the situation with the lot that has the waterfront.
Yep.
And I hope you all can work out something and that you can recover some of the money that you've invested. Yeah.
Thank you, Norma.
Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to share before we move on? Does that answer some of the questions that the appeals board had?
Well, from my standpoint, I still hope that there will be some follow-up process review and adjustments, so that you know, there have been several points that have been made about things that could have been handled better. I hope they don't get just lost. I know this is archived, but I hope this doesn't become just one discussion on one Tuesday night, that it really does get implemented, so that this doesn't get repeated again.
So this is Melanie taking all kinds of notes on my, because
good. Thank you.
You know, it's clear to me that the process isn't clear, and I've not been put in that situation, and it's unfortunate that anyone in town feels like they've been singled out for public scrutiny. And the process needs to be fair, it needs to be transparent, and it needs to be equal, no matter who the parties are. So if that's something that the board and the town needs to step back and reassess, then that's what I plan to make sure that we're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do appreciate that.
All right. Let's move on. All right, let's have a discussion of the 2020 town meeting. Hi, so I'm going to start the discussion briefly. Thank you so much for joining us, folks.
Thank you. I'm going to sign off now.
Okay, thank you for joining us. So, high five to Mary and Charlene and Anthony and Nick and everyone in that town office, because this town meeting, this election process was unprecedented in every way, shape, and form. The fact that almost a third of the citizens for the town of Belgrade voted by itself is astronomical. I remember years where we thought there would be a big turnout, we might get a couple hundred people. So nearly 900 people is amazing. We had clear shifting of responsibilities in the town office, smack dab in the middle of getting ready for this. And I have to say that every single person handled themselves with the utmost of grace and compassion and the realization of what everybody else was potentially going through. And I think, you know, there were a couple of snags, like running out of ballots, you know, things that you can't anticipate necessarily, but people thought on the fly what to do. And, you know, so my hat is off to you. So thank you so much for getting us through, and, you know, and hopefully setting an example for other communities who may not have been as successful, that I anticipate them checking in with Belgrade to see how come ours went so well. So does anybody else want to lead a discussion about this?
You're doing a good job.
So let me see what else we have. So we're going to have a second firefighter. Woohoo! Firefighter EMT, we're going to share that.
Melanie, if I can speak on this a little bit.
Absolutely.
You know, we've got to look at maybe doing town meeting different. I mean, this is the most people that I have ever known since I've lived here all my life so far. The biggest meeting at town meeting, I think, was 200. And if I remember, that was on the east-west road. We've never had this many people. So maybe that's what we need to change. I know there's a lot of other towns that do this, and it's not a bad thing. I'm impressed. I didn't think we'd get that many. But I tell you, the numbers tell you what people want, I think.
I think my biggest fear, Ricky, has been, I personally don't want to do away with the town meeting form of government. It is something that New England is known for. And I hate to see one more tradition go by the wayside. And my biggest concern with the process that we had this year is that folks were maybe not as informed and about all of the warrant articles, and we did our best to get information out to people. But for folks not to have a chance in an open forum to discuss things back and forth, have their questions answered, you know, have a chance to lower articles on the floor of town meeting, you know, those are some rights that we have that I would hate to see go by the wayside.
If people didn't get the information, it was their own fault. How many public hearings was it? 4?
Three or four,
whatever. The other thing is, I mean, you had 900 people telling you, us, I should say, how to spend the money. Yes. At a town meeting, it's usually 100, 110, maybe. Is that really fair? I mean, some people just don't want to come to town meeting and put their hand up, and, you know, people see they're voting against them. It's something we really need to look at. I mean, I don't want to change things either, but sometimes you gotta do what's right.
Yep.
Kathy?
I happen to agree with Ricky. I know that's a big surprise, Rick, but oh, fall over. But I absolutely agree with him. I think that,
fever, I think.
Is it COVID?
900 voters. Blows my mind. I've lived here for 40 odd years, 42, 43 years. Never have I seen that before. And town meeting, much as you love it, 100 people maybe. You know, and I get that. Maybe some kind of a hybrid. I think that it's worth continuing the discussion. But I agree with Rick. I think the townspeople are trying to tell us something.
Dan?
I think this year you're going to find was a fluke. I think you had a lot of people come out for the town meeting because the school budget was on the same day. The primary elections were the same day. So I think if this had happened another year and it was just town meeting, you probably would have seen about half the votes. You may have gotten more than we do with a normal town meeting, but I don't think you would have seen 900. The school budget's usually a fairly good sized turnout when they do it all on its own. And because I think people just wanted to get out, you know, and because so many people could vote absentee, that you had a lot more people vote. I think a hybrid would probably be a good thing. I think the board needs to sit down and put more of the high dollar budget items on the secret ballot and limit the town meeting to the stuff that really needs to be discussed, and there's an opportunity to possibly reduce it on the floor. I don't know. I don't think you're going to see 900 people turn out every year, especially if it's not the same time as school budget and everything else.
Especially if the ballot's quite as big as it was. I feel at the end, people were just like, whatever. Jay?
I think Dan makes a really good point. I was surprised. I was there all day as well. The number of people who came through that even as they were voting had no idea that there were 50 something articles that they had to deal with. And we had that discussion. I think that, but I do think it's healthy to have the discussion of, are we doing things the right way? I think I know there are towns that went away from the town meeting, and I think it's Reedfield, maybe one of them, and it didn't work out and they went back the other way around because, and I think Anthony summarized it nicely in his packet for the board to say, you know, what is the goal? Is the goal to get a budget passed, or is the goal to have an informed community? And I think if the goal is to have an informed community, you know, are we better off to have 100, 150 people who know what's going on, or just to get a yes vote? I think also to toss up there is, you know, if you as the board think that this is something we ought to explore, setting up a charter is another way to do it. You know, the town can go through the process to set up a charter so that we don't have a town meeting, so that there are public hearings and it is done by the board. That's the way the town of Winthrop does it. I was the ambulance service director there. But I would urge to proceed with a degree of caution. I think that one of the great benefits of the town meeting is that sense of community. And I mean, if there's 100, 125 people that come together, I mean, this is a time for neighbors and friends to get together. I don't think it changes the vote. Quite frankly, I don't think that the secret ballot changes the vote when we're talking about library and the special services and things like that. So I do hope that we pay really close attention to the value to the community of having that gathering in March when people can get together and talk and mingle with their neighbors. But to do so carefully, if you think about going to a charter or some other hybrid operation, because the grass may seem greener, but may not be.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on this?
I do.
Ernie?
Now, if somewhere down the line we change our fiscal year, we're not going to meet in March. We're going to meet in what, June?
May. May?
You know, that in itself potentially out more people to a town meeting. You know, and you know, someday we will have them in person again. But you know, I'm grateful that so many people took part in this, and we got through it because you know, there's a lot of question marks that were left. You know, we were all left scratching our heads whether it was going to fly or not, and I'm grateful it did with so many people involved.
I agree.
The only thing that I might add to that, and forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn since I haven't yet attended a traditional Belgrade town meeting, but I think there's perhaps opportunities to do both, where you could have a Saturday morning devoted to a thorough discussion of whatever issues that are on that ballot that people want to talk about. And like Rick said, you know, they have the opportunity to come, and then it's up to them whether or not they want to take advantage of that or not. And then, you know, at some point within 14 days, which is what the law prescribes, have all those items on a ballot and let people decide. And then they can decide, if they want to access the information and how they want to access the information. I hope that we did a good job of getting information out there. I mean, people didn't really take advantage of the public hearings, but we did do the special newsletter that was devoted almost strictly to the warrant, and we tried to post lots on our website and on our Facebook page and on our marquee, and hopefully some of those things made a little bit of a difference. I will add one other thing. If we do go to a ballot, though, I think it's really critical that we try to find a way to consolidate some articles so that people aren't having to wade through a ballot that takes them 30 minutes to fill out.
Well, and I think the problem, Anthony, was in the past, we combined too many things. So then the attempt was a handful of years ago to separate those items up to make them so that folks really understood where their tax dollars were being spent. But I will admit, I had a wicked kink in my neck by the time I was done. I kept trying to shift it and get it out.
You're absolutely right, though. We combined a lot of them together, and then people got confused, didn't know what was going on, so we separated them back out again.
Dan?
Yeah, Anthony and I had talked about, having the meeting and then 14 days later or whatever it was, voting on it the other day. And the more I thought about that, the problem with having that meeting, the town meeting, and then doing the ballot, you're just going to turn the town meeting into another public hearing that nobody attends, I think.
Well, and we also have to remember that in Belgrade, town meeting actually starts the first day of voting and it finishes at the end of town meeting. Mm-hmm. So if we hold town meeting and then a vote 14 days later, we will undoubtedly have the longest town meeting that anyone's ever seen in New England. So we would want to tuck those a little closer together.
So we could change it over to like the school board. We just put a dollar amount out there as a budget and say yes or no.
I don't love that plan. Because I feel like then that takes, that's been one of the problems with the school board and the school budget is that even historically, when you go to vote on the school budget, there's not background information provided for folks. They simply get a dollar amount. And that's not a process I've ever been happy with. So, but I'm one of 5, so.
No, there's no good solution.
I've even thought of like shuttling people to vote if that's an issue with folks being able to get to the polling places.
I think we need to put our heads together and work on this. This is something we don't throw in the closet. We keep it out and keep bringing it up. See what we come up with new ideas. Something new has got to work.
Yeah, and I think to some extent, circumstances may dictate what we do in the spring because who knows if we're going to be in a holding pattern like this for a while.
Right.
But I also think that Jay raises a good point, and that is, like, what's the purpose of it all? Do we stop and think, do we do it because we want a budget passed? Do we do it because we want to see people in the community come together? Once we have an idea as to what the real functions are for quote unquote a town meeting or a hybrid or any kind of a, getting together and voting on the town budget, then I think we have a better idea as to how we're going to be able to do it and how we should do it going forward. Because to me, it appears, as it did in this past election, that we were motivated by getting a town budget voted on. And that was it. And what you, Melanie, are saying and what Jay is saying is that there's a certain social aspect to the town meeting that ought not to be ignored. So I think that we, as Ricky says, I think we have to sort those things out and really put our heads together and decide what it is that we want going forward and what we want to propose to folks going forward.
I agree.
Well, and I do think that, I think the overarching goal is just simply engagement. We want citizens engaged in the governance of their community. And so this year they chose to do that by turning out in droves and voting. And I don't, it's not the sort of engagement that the town was used to at town meeting, but it's engagement nonetheless. And so to me, that ought to be the overarching goal. And then it's, okay, how do we want to get people engaged?
I don't disagree with that. I think that, I think that's part of it. It may not be the whole thing, but it is part of it.
All right, moving on.
May I just bring up one other quick thing that was in my memo? I got a call yesterday from the folks from the lighting company that we've been talking with about transitioning to LED streetlights. And I didn't even bother picking up the phone because I knew what he was going to be asking, and I knew I needed to talk to you folks yet. But that did get approved on the ballot. All of that money is coming from the undesignated fund. Do we want to go ahead and pursue the LED streetlight conversion?
Yeah, I think so. I would. Approved.
I think we're investing money from the undesignated fund with the townspeople's permission in the interest of saving them money down the road.
So here's the second question then. We had talked about before not going through an RFP process because once you factor in the savings that are going to be involved, it would fall under that $15,000 threshold. And, this company, Affinity Lighting, has been through a gajillion RFP processes throughout New England, including in Maine, including in some of our neighbors' communities. Do we want to just go ahead and negotiate with them, or do we want to go through the RFP process?
What had we decided on this previously? Because
we have flip-flopped.
Doesn't it have to do with a dollar amount?
It does. And so if you're just looking at the gross dollars that would be spent, it would be above that $15,000 threshold. If you factor in the savings that it would yield, then it would be less than that. So
yeah, we never factor in the savings though. It's a straight up front cost because the savings is anticipated. It's not guaranteed.
15,000 or more, it's got to go out for RFP.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that being the case, I have my marching orders and we'll ready the RFP. I'll bring that to you maybe as soon as the next meeting, and we'll get to work on that, because the sooner we get to work on it, the sooner we can save 86% of our streetlight electrical costs per year.
Agreed.
Perfect. Yeah, because no RFP goes out without the select board review.
Gotcha. I learned that the hard way, Melanie.
Dan, did you have something else on that?
No, well, it's before we move on from the town meeting. I just had a couple comments I need to put towards Anthony. A couple of people that came in that were new to town were having trouble getting a hold of information on what was on the ballot and stuff. They said they called the town office, and somebody at the town office told them to call the state or get a hold of look on the state's website having to do with elections. And I'm not really sure what was going on, but they couldn't seem to get any information. And they got onto the state's election website, and it still said all the voting was at the town office. So it didn't even have the right voting place on it.
So I'm not aware of what you're talking about, Dan, but all I can tell you is, we had information consistently on, well, I mean, at the top of the web page, the home page, on the Facebook page, in the newsletter, in the annual report, which we were,
I'm just
passing on the marquee. So
passing along stuff from the new residents to town. They said they went to our web page and they couldn't find it on the web page or anything else.
It was at the top of the home page.
I have no idea.
And we actually do have an elections page on the website as well.
Okay, but can we check with the state where stuff gets transferred over to the state?
Yeah, we'll check with the Secretary of State's office.
There's something there apparently that says where the elections are being held and where you vote and everything else. And apparently it's old information according to the ladies.
And even on election day this year, you could vote at the town office because that's where we had our absentee ballots. And it looks like Mary's wanting to weigh in.
I was going to check in with her. Mary, what did you want to say?
She's muted.
Oh. Hold on, Mary.
Mary, can you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. No, I just wanted to provide comment on that because I'm not sure who those individuals spoke to because that information was all available and it was provided to anybody that asked the question. We did have sample ballots hanging up as well. And the election site was Secretary of State's office. I had checked it. It was all updated as to where the election was, who the election officials were. So I'm not really sure, Dan, who they spoke with in the office. And, there are several of us that could have answered that question. So my apologies. And if you know who they are, anyway, the information is always posted at the office, and Anthony did a good job of getting it on the website and the information. It's my intention next year, for maybe this next election, to possibly get the actual ballots posted to our website so people could view the ballot, and that would provide the information that they're looking for. So, okay.
Is the town report also posted on the website?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, in multiple places.
Yes.
I told them I thought it was all there, so the lady said that she was new in town.
And so what we do, Dan, because obviously that's an entire booklet, when we posted that, we would say that the articles begin on page 77 and it's on page 83 of your PDF. And so that way it made it easy for them to access it.
All right, so moving on, we also have here that the cemetery committee is to make a recommendation on when the new cemetery rates will go into effect.
Correct. So when we thought we were going to be voting in March, that had an effective date of July the 1st. And so it seems to me that we might want to give people, a little bit of a grace period before those go into effect since they're newly, so I asked the cemetery committee to make a recommendation, and we'll bring that to you at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. And we have Chris is working on the specs for purchasing a 110.
Yes, ma'am.
And Ricky, you're working on that with him.
I have asked Chris once he gets those drafted to share those with Ricky to make sure we're not missing anything that we need to with those specs.
Okay. And all right, and the perpetuity articles, Becky's still willing to work with us on those?
She is. She's
not exhausted. We're famous for that in Belgrade. When you think somebody is retired, we just keep dragging them back. Look at Cheryl at town meeting. Yes, Kathy?
I see that Dan McKenzie's on the wire here. And there was a thing about the mutual aid agreement for the second firefighter. And I wanted to know if he wanted to say anything about that. Or is he just hanging out with us to be a good guy?
Dan, are you really there or you just have it on?
I'm here.
Oh, hi.
Hello there, Dan.
Hear all of that with the dogs barking.
Oh, my house too. I sent him outside.
So what was the question?
Well, I just wanted to know if you'd comment on what you're doing up in Rome with the mutual.
Well, I met last night with Gary, just to jot notes down, and then we're going to get with Anthony and I think whoever their first select board. I don't know her name, but and then try to draft up the agreement and come up with a job description and get ready to post the job after it's approved by the Rome and Belgrade Select Board.
Okay. So when do you think you might be posting that?
Well, I'm hoping next week to have another meeting, is get together, find out when Anthony's available and there's first select board, and we'll start, I already have some documents. I think we just got to fine tune it.
Thank you.
Hopefully within the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll have hopefully out to be posted, or maybe by your next select board meeting, you can have, look at a draft.
That'd be cool.
All right, thank you, Dan.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
All right. Next on our agenda is the approval of the July 7th Select Board meeting minutes. Kathy?
I had a couple of questions on that. And that is, I know that we talked about the ad hoc group with Susan Littlefield. And I wanted to know if there was some kind of a timeline as to when she was going to come back with a recommendation for us.
Yeah, so when we talked about that last, we wanted to obviously get through the election, but I think, you know, bringing something back to you guys in the early spring makes a lot of sense to me. So maybe an April 1st deadline is a good idea once we get past town meeting.
Okay. Other question I had too was about a timeline, and that was about the communications committee crafting a policy for board consideration.
Yes, so that's already on the that's already on the committee's radar. And in fact, on election day, I got to speak with Gina Coppins, who's the committee chair, about talking about that. And so I think that's going to be on the agenda for next month's communications committee meeting.
Great, great. And the only other thing I had on here, I must have had my date calendar in my head, because we are due to do an evaluation on you. And I was curious to know if anybody in this austere group of people had an interest in setting a date for Anthony's evaluation, so we could then fill out the evaluation forms. And what do? We send them to you, Melanie?
So I believe what we had discussed at the last meeting, Kathy, is that the evaluation forms would be in everyone's mailbox at the town office for them to pick up. We haven't yet set a date to do that, but that we would be meeting via Zoom anyhow, that we would keep those with ourselves until the process was over.
Okay. So they're at the town office. They have, I thought I got one in the email.
Yeah, I did email them out, but if y'all want paper copies, then I can put them in boxes.
I think I printed it out at home.
Anthony, can you send me one? I didn't get one.
Okay.
I don't remember seeing one, but I will double check. Sometimes I read it and anticipate I'm going to come back to it and then don't.
Yeah, it was attached to the follow-up email I sent after the last meeting. So I try to send those on Wednesday. So I think it's attached to that.
Okay.
So the process is for us to fill them out and hang on to them until the date that we do the evaluation, right? Is that what I hear?
Yeah, do we want to look at doing the evaluation in an executive session after our next board meeting?
Sure.
What do we got on the agenda for the next meeting? You know, any idea?
So far, not much. You know, we'll have the cemetery committee recommendation on that, and the RFP for the street lights. So those are two things.
If we're going to do that, it should be a fairly short meeting, because we're going to have you in there for a while.
That sounds ominous, Rick.
I know, God. He makes it sound so awful.
Like I'm going to be lashed or something.
Can't do it by Zoom.
You are in New England.
Welcome to Maine.
I was about to say, I've not yet been accused of witchcraft or anything. I don't think I deserve lashing.
Keep it under, don't say that. Don't say that. I haven't filled out my evaluation yet.
Right.
Like where humor lives.
I hope I'm funnier than that.
All right, so if there's no other discussion, I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the July 7th meeting.
Make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second, sure.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none. Roll call vote. Ricky, how do you vote?
I guess so. Yes.
Ernie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dan, how do you vote?
I wasn't on the board, so I'm going to abstain from the minutes. Because I don't even have a copy. I didn't get a copy of them or anything else. So.
Okay, so I was gonna say, I think you were there for the
I was there for most of the meeting.
for
But
Zoom, yeah.
Put that in your evaluation, Vern.
All right, Kathy, how do you vote?
Yes.
All right, and I vote yes. So 4 in favor, 1 abstention. All right, we are now at warrant number 1. Well, not number 1, warrant number 95.
Right, right.
Anthony, do you have the warrant present?
I do. So this is warrant number 95 in the amount of $596,108.99.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, the warrant's open for discussion.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Kathy.
Page 6, check number 2021-7, and it says workers' compensation redo for close to $5,000. What's a workers' comp redo?
Well, the redo is on the issuance of the check itself. So on the last warrant, this was on there, but it also included in that same check the $30 charge that is right below that also went to Maine Municipal. And so the MMA asked if we would break out those two charges into separate checks. And so we had to, you see the cash management training also has the redo tag on it. So we had to redo that at the request of the MMA.
Thank you.
Kathy, can I follow up with that one for a minute?
Have a ball.
So if on our last warrant, we approve that amount, and then what we're doing on this warrant is simply breaking those amounts into different checks, would that still be reflected in this total? Because it should, if it was already approved, this should not affect the warrant total. Maybe an explanation, because otherwise.
So you're right. In essence, this is a journal entry. And so if you'd like not to include those journal entries into the warrant, then we can just sort of make a note of that and let you guys know that. But my understanding is you guys have to approve every check that goes out. And so there are two separate checks in this instance.
So, but the warrant total reflects those amounts.
It does. And so you're right. Those amounts were in the last warrant, but we didn't release those funds.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. So I wonder if for clarity, I don't know how we do that a little bit differently, but maybe, Dan, do you have a suggestion?
no, I want to know if Anthony has that warrant on his computer, on his email right in front of him, so he could forward it to me so I could at least take a look at it.
Oh, let's see, Dan.
I think I can send it from my cell phone. If you don't,
I'll do that. I'll do that, Melanie. That's exactly what I was going to do.
All right. And while we're waiting for that, does anyone else have questions or?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Rick.
On page number 3, it looks like it just popped up. It looked like Cheryl Cook made a lot more money than the rest of them. Is there a reason?
Yes, because she worked far more hours than the others. So as Melanie mentioned, we ran out of ballots because we did not anticipate that number of voters, and so she came into the office for many days prior to the election, just helping us to process those ballots.
Okay. If we go to the next page, page number 4, Howard Hollinger, he's was up there in dollars.
Yeah, well, and Mary's got her hand raised, and maybe she should speak to that. But of course, I assume he gets paid at a different rate, being the warden, and he also did. He was there for the early processing of the absentee ballots and for all of the testing of the machines. So he didn't just work on election day. He worked days.
Okay, no, that's fine. I'm fine with that. I just didn't know if there was a mistake because I looked at all the rest of them and they were little money and a couple of them popped right out.
Yes. So with the exception of Cheryl and Howard, I think most of them just worked either on election day or just that one day of processing the absentee ballots ahead of time.
Okay. Mary, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
He's muted again.
Mary.
There you go.
I'm right here. So yeah, no, I just wanted to say, yeah, Howard and Cheryl both worked extra time. Howard came in and did the early ballot processing, as Anthony mentioned, and Cheryl provided some additional assistance plus the early ballot processing. So they really provided some great support to me, and getting through this election, and I appreciate everything they did. I just wanted to also speak to, I think that Nick actually had to remove those 2 checks, only because I've done this before. So he had to deduct the 2 checks from the last warrant and then reissue on this warrant. So his last warrant should have been minus those 2 checks, and this warrant is inclusive of those 2 checks.
But that would be a journal. That would be a journal entry, correct, Mary?
Yeah, he has to return the checks because they've been returned. So he has to return the checks. So they're not showing right on the last warrant. He minuses them out. He reissues the check.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
I got a couple more on page number 4. Easton and Peabody. The first one on the top of the page.
Yep.
Attorney deal. Who was this?
Yeah, so that was the final blow in the Brightside case.
But that's not the regular attorney we've been using, is it?
Yes. So don't forget that when you guys first hired Mike Hodgins, he was working for Bernstein Shore, but at some point during the course of that case, he moved to Eaton Peabody, and so all of the fees that we kept Mike on the case, and so all the fees that we've paid since then have gone to Eaton Peabody as opposed to Bernstein Shore.
I guess I hadn't seen that name before. The other thing down, generators in Maine. There's Danny. I can get on him. Village light repair. I thought that was. Is that the ones in Belgrade Lights? Is that the one?
It is. And so those have now been deeded over to the town, although the Friends continue to pay the electric bill on those for the time being. And so that was just replacing so the timer during one of our thunderstorms, the timer blew out. And so they removed that timer and put in photo eyes so that we don't have to, so that they come on whenever the sunlight is either dim enough or go off when it becomes bright enough, as opposed to being on a timer.
Well, I thought in the agreement that they had to take care of that for so many years before we picked it up. You may want to go back and read that agreement.
Okay.
Just to make sure.
Okay.
And I'm not needle picking here, but I'll add one more. Hang on. I circled this thing all up, but you can see I had a little time tonight. Oh, I guess that was it.
All right, on that same page, I just have a quick question. I'll grab you, Arnie, in just a second. Under Hammond Lumber, we have a fix the bench at the park for 171.
What's my question?
What's happened to the bench?
So that was at Hayden Park, and the bench had just rotted out, and it posed a safety hazard. So fortunately, a citizen pointed that out to us, and Chris went over there straight away and got it into good shape again.
Yeah, good.
All right, does anybody have any more on the warrant?
I had a quickie question here, if I can find it. Oh, on page 7, just a curiosity question. Somerset County Sheriff Dispatch. What's our total bill for dispatch going to be this year? Was it 36,000?
Oh, golly, no, I think it was closer to the total cost, if memory serves me correctly, Kathy, was somewhere in the neighborhood of 43,000. And, and
I
as,
remember we started at 30 and then it got a little fuzzy after that.
well, and remember Waterville, I'm sorry?
Are we paying quarterly?
Yes, and so Waterville went up on their price pretty significantly. So I'll get you that figure. It was in the it was on the warrant and in the town report, but I don't recall it off the top of my head.
Right.
But for some reason, 43,000 sounds familiar to me.
Okay.
And Somerset's the organization that we send the most money to.
All righty. Thank you.
Any
Rod.
more discussion?
Any other questions?
All right, seeing none. All right. Kathy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ricky, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ernie, how do you vote?
Yes.
All right, and I vote yes to approve the warrant.
And then you may have seen I sent another late breaking warrant this morning, warrant number 97, in the amount of $353.47. So Lily went to go mail the oversized postcard promotional for the artisan show that's going to happen on August the 2nd, and they wouldn't take the town's credit card. The post office wouldn't, which I actually ran into that when I was trying to mail the newsletters, and the postmaster had pity on my soul and waited a day for that, but she didn't see the sense of urgency with this. So we issued a new warrant so that we can get those postcards out.
Okay, Dan, do you have something?
The last warrant before you need to go down to the bottom and change all the select persons and stuff.
Yes.
Oh, we sure do.
I was going to mention that.
Good catch. Thank you.
Unless you want me to sign Mike's name.
And we'll make sure that it's updated on the website and
it's already updated on the website.
And for the newsletter, because sometimes that gets a little
behind.
Right. So is there any discussion on that warrant?
I'll make the motion, we accept it.
I'll second.
Sorry, Ernie, go ahead.
All right. There's no further discussion. Ricky, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ernie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Kathy, how do you vote?
Yes.
All right, and I vote yes. 5-4-0 against. All right, is there anything else? I did, just so you folks know, I did get a couple of messages from the person who wanted to talk about Camp Bombazine, and she was unable to get into the meeting via the Zoom link. I sent it to her a couple of times and it kept bouncing her back saying that it was invalid. So I did tell her, Anthony, that I would pass her phone number along to you and she welcomes a conversation.
Perfect.
Okay. Is there anything else that anybody wants to deal with this evening?
We still have the town manager report, so there are a couple things I want to touch on that.
Whoops. Look at me zooming
Let's do that, and I do have something I want to.
Okay.
Board.
Okay, so I'm actually, with the exception of one thing, I'm not going to mention anything that's actually in the report because some things have come up since then. The one thing I'll mention is our Salt Well ad hoc group met for the first time the other day, and of course that group includes Melanie and Dan, and they are interested, the group is, in drilling a test well to see if there is potable water, if we go deep enough as opposed to shallow. And they're proposing doing that on the grounds of the town office if we can find a driller who thinks that's even a possibility. We still have $48,000 left in the salt well account. And I think, if memory serves me correctly, everyone was thinking that might cost somewhere in the neighborhood of about $10,000 to drill a deep well. So Melanie and Dan, if you guys want to weigh in on that, we'd like the rest of y'all's opinion.
So what we had discussed in the meeting was talking to DOT and seeing who the well drilling company was that were doing the other test wells in the Belgrade area. And it turns out it's a well drilling company out of Topsom. So I think we'd like some guidance from the board if the feeling is that we should use that same company or if we should use a local contractor. You know, there are several well drillers in our area. So if you folks have any ideas, we'd welcome them.
I'd rather go local. There's some good guys down in Gardner that, you know, we've used.
We got Sydney, I think we have, and
Oakland.
How deep you guys talking about going? I mean, some well drillers might not be able to go that deep. I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Well, what it is, Rick, we wanted to drill one right over by the existing well. And we figured if we can experiment on the town property, if we can hit some good water, we'll recoup some of the cost by being able to get rid of the treatment system in the town office. So I don't know just how deep. That's why we wanted to originally talk to the person drilling for the state and kind of see how deep they had to go, and when they found good water up behind the town, the state garage or wherever it was that they drilled that well.
Sounds like maybe it's a plan.
I think it sounds like a good idea. You know, I just I like local, if we can possibly go local, and I think it's a great idea, because then, and your idea is to then be able to drill wells deep enough for potable water for the people that are affected with the saltwater contamination. Okay.
that's the hope, is that once the salt sets long enough that it gets to an acceptable level, and if we can,
right,
one more option on the table.
Yep. I like options. Good idea.
All right. Wanted to make you guys aware of, I got a call this afternoon from a distraught Belgrade school teacher who encountered a situation that, frankly, I'm embarrassed it didn't occur to me at the time with our library. And that is, she went to the library, she made an appointment to go to the library with her 2 kids and was told, you know, we only allow 1 person in here at a time. And they were 2 young kids. And so I said, you know what, we should have thought about that. And so I'm going to call over there and make sure that you can get in. And so they did let them in, and everyone, you know, kept their distance and were safe, and everyone wore their mask and so forth. So, you know, I know that you guys approved 1 person at a time in there, 1 in the stacks and 1 at the computers. But what I'd like to do is just allow the librarians to, you know, use their good sense and make judicious decisions involving families or maybe someone with a caretaker, so that, you know, it doesn't make sense if someone shows up with a 6 and an 8-year-old kid to turn them away or expect that those kids to go into the library by themselves. And so I'd like our staff just to have the leeway just to make those sort of judicious decisions.
Makes sense to me.
Okay. Sense to me.
One of the things that got approved at the town meeting was our updated dams agreement. And so we need to sign that. And do we want our new board chair to sign that, or do you want me to sign that?
Flip a coin.
Melanie, do you have a preference?
How have we done it previously?
The last one that we signed was in 1988, so I'm not sure.
I'm happy to sign it then.
Okay, so you want me to sign that tomorrow and get it executed?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Well, should we have just 1 person signing it though, or should it be?
Yeah, so remember there are 5 communities in the agreement, and each one has an executor on that agreement.
All right, so what is the preference of the board? Should it be the town manager that signs it, or should it be the select board chair? So I think other communities don't have a town manager.
I could be the select board chair. I want to give her all the chance to write her name as possible.
DocuSign, my signature's great.
Fine with you signing it, Melanie.
Okay.
You, Otto.
Okay. So I'll send that to you tomorrow, Melanie, for your signature.
Okay.
If you haven't yet been by the town office, our new deputy clerk started yesterday. And so that is going well so far, 2 days into it. And lastly, I'm sorry.
What is their name?
So her name is Karen Rancourt Thomas, and she previously was a deputy clerk in the town of Benton.
Oh, I see.
Although she's also worked in Waterville as well.
Great.
And lastly, we discussed the solar farm moratorium, and including wind turbines and cell phone towers with the planning board last Thursday. So we're working on that. We're going to have something for them to consider as a recommendation to you at their next meeting. But they were curious whether or not you guys have had any feedback whatsoever on the application that they approved on the Manchester Road. It got a lot of attention from the abutters, but they were wondering if you've heard from other quarters of the community about solar farms.
Yeah, sorry. I have, and I have had a couple of folks ask if it's possible that they can get in on the sharing of the electricity that's generated.
Yes, that's what I heard as well. People were asking, but also the idea that it was a good thing for Belgrade to do a solar farm as opposed to, some of the other possibilities. So.
That's all I had.
That's it?
Oh, one last thing. So when we do the town manager evaluation, at one point we had talked about the board doing sort of a self-evaluation. Do you guys want to try to do that on the same night, or not do it at all, or do it on a different night?
I'd do it on a different night.
Yeah, okay. One at a time.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll put that on a future agenda, but I think it might be helpful since, obviously you've got a new member, you're going to have a new dynamic. And so it might be helpful just to everyone get on the same page of the hymnal as you're moving forward.
Well, Dan's done this before, so it's not his first rodeo. As we were discussing earlier, once you've done it, you can't go away. You tried it.
You watch.
You get sucked right back in.
I'm done.
You guys might have worked with him before, but I haven't.
Well, you did. You worked with him a little bit when he was on the budget committee, so
I had no idea
how Dan operates. Rick, you have something else?
Yeah. I want to ask the board a question. Did any of you board members get a email from Sean Grant in the last week or so, maybe 2 weeks?
No.
No.
Directly to you or to Anthony, and then it was shared?
It was. It was to Mike Barrett, but it was supposed to be coming to the board for a question to be asked. I want to do that, but I think what we need to do at the next meeting, we need to go to executive session, and this stuff needs to stop.
Okay.
Ricky, should we go into executive session now?
It's fine with me if you want to do that. I don't care. Yes, maybe that's a good idea. I think we need to stop it before.
All right, well, hang on. So I make a motion that we exit the select board meeting.
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Sorry. Dan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ricky?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Ernie?
Yes.
All right, I'll vote yes.
Hold on a second. I need to stop the recording.
Let's take a 5-minute break here and let